Hafeez Habibi has around 40 years of experience with extensive professional involvements. His works are spread within and outside the country. In the initial period of his professional involvements, he was associated with NESPAC and for some time with Payet Associates while he was in Boston, USA, where he worked with architect Mozan Kadem on the Armed Forces Medical City project. Habibi acknowledges that Mozan has had a great impact on his thoughts and vision on architecture. In the initial phase of his professional career, he designed the UBL Zonal Head Office Building Islamabad, for which he also received an Award of Excellence. A large number of architecture and urban development projects are on his professional credit. Habibi has a very diverse vision towards architecture. His architectural philosophy revolves around the idea that architecture is not an act of creation, but rather an act of discovery. He believes that architecture is the reflection of the inner reality of natural and cultural phenomena, and that the role of the architect is to search and discover the unique and singular architecture that exists in the ideal state of each cultural phenomenon.
Most people in our profession, unfortunately, come in this profession not by choice, but by virtue of the circumstances that they come into the profession. I find myself in a much advantageous position that, it was my choice from the beginning. Even before I studied in the senior classes, I had the objective and the wish and the dream that one day I will become an architect. Since my early ages. And the reason was this, that I had a family background, which was very literary family, and a lot of people within my family belong to, fine arts. Particularly, my uncle was also an artist, poet. My father himself was a poet, though he was a bureaucrat, but his passion was poetry. He's author of a couple of books, Hafeez Habibi. And my house actually had become an institution. Why? Because when we were in Islamabad, every Saturday, the intellectuals from the city would come and gather. Not from the city, actually. People used to come from all over country. Famous, iconic personalities in poetry and art. They would come and visit our place. My father would arrange a gathering every Saturday where, these people, and I was silent observer. And that casted a lot of influence on my personality and my future. I grew within that environment. And particularly then, slowly I started developing passion of, painting. Started doing painting at the very early stage, like 7th class. One day, my paintings were there in the display, and Tajuddin Bhavani came, who was a famous architect at the time. And he knew my father, and then he inquired about me. And after looking at my paintings and my other area of interest, that I was a science student, then he suggested my father that best profession for your son would be if he could go to architecture. So that somehow settled in my mind that one day I will have to become an architect. Then I started studying architecture. I remember when I was in class 8, when many of my class fellows didn't even know the name of an architect, I would go to the British Council libraries and American Council libraries and would study, many like Frank Lloyd Wright and Le Corbusier and all people. I studied at that time, so it had become my passion. And ultimately, that definitely when something becomes your passion, you work on that line. Ultimately, I became an architect and I came to Karachi, got admission in Dawood College, and so entered into the profession. This is very important actually. When I see that most students in Pakistan, they come to architecture because they get admission in engineering or architectural colleges. There are hardly few institutions in Pakistan where students go with their choice to become an architect. But actually, that is the reason only 1 or 2% children are there who actually should have become designers. Otherwise, they are sitting there under compulsion that they have to produce designs, and they pass their whole life in a cursed situation where they are not designers, but they have to fulfill this thing, and they have to fulfill the expectations of people. So that is the I find myself in a much better situation, that at least I achieved what I wanted.
And what about your Kamel? He has come with his own interest, or you forced him to become an architect?
No, I never wanted to force him. Though it was my inner desire that he should become an architect, because he was also very good in paintings and his sketching was good. But somehow he was also good in mathematics. So his teachers advised him to go in a practical profession, like undertake the actuarial sciences or those kind of. So he got admission in UFT, University of Toronto. So from there he went into in a line which was nothing to do with architecture, but risk management. He did his graduation from there. But then one day he called me from there that, I want to jump into architecture. So I said, it's your own choice. So I said, okay. And then he came to London. From there he did his graduation in architecture, and then from Architectural Association, he did his master's in urbanism. In the last 5 years he's with us, and I think he has a very creative aptitude, and contributing a lot to the company. Quite a difficult question, I would say, because it's it's the general aptitude of an architect, or general behavior of every architect in Pakistan or elsewhere, is that I should be really a creative one. So creativity is associated with architecture. In search of creativity, people go carried away, and they start creating architecture and start doing juggleries. But actually my vision of architecture is quite different. My vision of architecture is that it's a very serious subject. It should not be taken like this thing, and it's an act of discovery. It's not an act of creation. I mean, we take it as something to fulfillment of our own desire, and we work on that. Whereas actually in actual, we deal with a very serious subject, and we never take this as that kind of subject. This is actually, I would say that in my definition of architecture, that I mean that like the architecture of a tree lies in the seed of the tree, and when that seed is interacted with the sun, with the soil, particularly soil of that area, and with many other natural factors that give birth to a particular foliage of the tree, and that is the architecture of the tree. And likewise, the architecture itself is a natural phenomena, cultural phenomena, where it actually lies within the forces, contemporary forces, where the political, geographical, geological, cultural, social, religious, all multiple the factors are there which form that particular architecture. And the role of architect is the search to discover the inner reality of that particular culture. So every time when there is a change in technology, we have seen that there is a change comes in the social structure. Civilization changes with the changing technology, like in industrial time, when the mode of production and technology change, the architecture started going. So international style came on. So actually, it is actually all these factors that give birth to a particular, and we are actually busy. And those people who are the pioneers, who are actually visionary people, they actually somehow discovered the reality of that particular era. Like I would say, Mies or Le Corbusier, they discovered the inner reality of a culture of a time, say maybe in the early or the last century. And that time they discovered the inner reality of a technocratic culture. And then they were able to produce modern art. That we call it modern architecture. And prior to that, same thing happened. Earlier you can see, if you go into the history, you will find there are quite people who are visionary people who discover the inner reality of that time, and they become actually the focal point, the like torch bearer of that particular era. So actually, they were all busy in discovering the inner reality of that culture, that technology, that the social aspects of that. So combine all things combined gave birth to a particular style. Actually, what happens that when we adapt that particular style, technology and social change is that the world is continuously changing. So that becomes obsolete. Time comes and becomes obsolete. So the role of architect, because at the it's continuously changing. So at present time, what we are doing actually, we are actually out to searching. The pioneers of this period will be those who will actually ingenuinely, naturally find the reality of our time. So we are actually in that situation. So my vision of architecture is not the architecture of Dubai, where you go to Dubai, you can see everybody is busy in their own self-ego gratification. So, they are not looking actually producing an architecture. In any case, and I would say actually, if you look at this thing from the other point of view, architect today is actually tied up with many circumstances, and he cannot actually uh, uh, think beyond a certain parameter. Whatever he has been taught, he will come. It's very difficult for him to jump out of that particular framework where he's spending his time, and he spends all his life without thinking what he's doing it. So if you think out of box, then you start realizing that that whatever is being done is actually he's just following some trend, no matter how relevant that trend is to society, but he's just following. And most people are doing that. We also feel the same level of frustration somehow. But actually, the desire, if once you start realizing what he's doing, that is the only hope that actually something may come up. But if there is no desire to jump out of it, you will continue spending time, in the same style, which will be totally irrelevant. So that's my idea about actually, I would continue from your last question that, of course, we are going through a state of confusion, and from there, what I have further looked into, and what should be the most appropriate architecture that should be produced. Not all the time you get that opportunity to actually work on those. What I thought that the way I view the architecture is actually there are few things which are common. Even if you go to the primitive age, classic age, and see what are the commonality, actually the human being is the common factor. So our emphasis in the classical time was more towards the addressing the human desire, particularly with regard to his aesthetics and his cultural desire. So it was not technologically overemphasized subject. At that time, that was the reason that they produced architecture that was more oriented towards the human being. I would give you example that when I studied architecture of various era, that early period architecture inspired me more. Why? Because they used to deal with the human scale. And the human scale, when you talk of human scale, uh, definitely all those factors do come in, like the aesthetics, like his psychological need and all those things. Particularly when I study the Muslim architecture, I find that, uh, the essence of that architecture, particularly when talk of urban fabrics of producer, that particularly if you go to Maidan Shah Isfahan, or if you go to Al Hamra, or Al Faid, or Egypt, I mean larger scale subjects, you find styles which are more humane, and particularly the kind of spaces that were being produced. But then actually what happened, that we were invaded by the technology, and the technology took us to a level where actually we came into, and we adapted a style which was called international style, or that kind of thing. So we started producing buildings which are oversimplified building, and that was true for good for that time period. But what happened, that we got carried away with the technological involvements, and so much so that instead of using the technology uh, uh, to the benefit of humanity, we became subservient to the technology, and so started producing architecture that uh, detached us from the basic human desires. With the motto of the less is more, which is the motto of everybody today, you can see what happened. Actually, we got departed from our relationship, our pact, human pact with the architecture. We got departed. Now, what happened actually? Now, today, what we see in the modern period, which is defined modern period after the Mies, that was the style that was required for a particular period. Yes, but in that style, that technology became a dominant factor. And instead of using that technology continuously for our own benefit, actually we started producing architecture. Like I will give you example that the students who are trained in the modern institutions or Western institutions, or even in our institutions where the teachers from West are coming and teaching, we start, when we are given an assignment, we start with some kind of diagrams that will relate the functions in the shortest possible manner. When we design a building, we design a service code. So what we have, our orientation has totally changed. Now we have started designing for the technology, for the plumbing lines. We want to cut short on the plumbing lines. And we forgot what the human desire was. And in terms of scale also, we forgot, because we wanted to, all the vertical movements, all those created lot of, volumes, which were actually not beyond the desire of the human beings. Beyond, if you compare with the, because everybody compares with their own scale, the volumes he compares with his scale, and there are always inner desire in subconsciously, that you want to relate to comfortable environment, but those imposing masses, they create a lot of adverse effect on the human minds. We have no consideration for that, and we design cosmetics only, and design for the technology. Now this is a very important point, that we have lost our orientation. Earlier in the classical time, we had the orientation to fulfill the desire of the human being. Today, the human beings are designing buildings for the technology, and for the plumbing lines, and for the efficiency of those things, and forgot about the desires of the human beings. This is very, very unfortunate if we don't realize what we are doing, how much we have got carried away. I will give you example like this, that uh, if an architect, and I will not blame architect only, because the poor architect, when he is given an assignment of the building, by then actually the architecture is already designed. He doesn't have much of space actually to maneuver, because the architecture or the volume of those spaces, or the volumes of those structures that are going to put there, are actually already designed by the urban planner and the economist, because of the viability of the subject. Like if you have to design a building in Manhattan, and you are given a plot, you have nothing to do. Or a building in Dubai, you have nothing to do because the economist and the urban planner has already determined the size of the building. The volume is already there. So when you enter into this into that area, you have nothing to do except put some cosmetics and some some makeup on the subject, and that is what maximum you are doing. And in that also you have nothing, no other objective but to show that what how great you are and how can you be recognized. So your ego gratification is actually the prime subject. Your ego gratification is your prime, becomes your prime subject, and because you don't have anything else to do. So my desire is that whenever I get an opportunity, I will actually develop a design which is close to the cultural desire of that particular group of people whom I'm designing. So the design has to be culturally responsive. Now, to be culturally responsive doesn't always mean that I go and design in primitive style. It doesn't mean that. It means that you have to do justice with the contemporary and look for and search for an architecture which is an appropriate architecture for that particular area, which does justice to the technology, which uses the technology to the optimum, to the best way, and addresses all the cultural and human desire. And in that, the examples, how the primitive, how the classical, in the classical time, the architects have addressed those problems. And so that is actually, it's kind of, I have to create an appropriateness in architecture. Neither I would go and design a building totally in a primitive way and forget about the contemporary requirements of the technology, nor I will design something with the motto of less is more, and deprive the people from their desire of relating to the building. So that is actually such a critical task that I would say that if that effort is with you, then one might succeed one day in addressing, closing, making it closer to the required subject. What we are going through is actually a state of total confusion, I would say. Whether you talk of Europe, West, or East, or Pakistan, the situation is not much different. Everybody is actually busy in doing something which he is not sure if he is doing right. So this state of confusion, I would say, that's a reflection of our time, because we are actually in the transformation stage, and this transformation is enormously huge. We don't really understand the actual what will be the actual effect, what will be the actual result of this transformation onto the society. We are going through that transformation. So that present state of confusion is actually the reflection of the present state. So I would say that the international style that we welcome today in Pakistan, a lot of people practice that with pride, is actually totally irrelevant today. West has realized that a couple of decades, 2-3 decades back, in 1970s, they declared the death of modern architecture. When St. Louis, the Yamasaki's design, Yamasaki's huge complex of modern Redefining complex was blasted out. That was that is the mark of a change. And they realized that, this less is more philosophy, oversimplification, is actually not the reflection of today's desire, because people have started desiring, started realizing that they have gone carried away. Yes, of course, the Mies and the Corbusier and all those people, they actually did great job. They were great figures of that time, and they realized that what was required in the post-industrial culture. But then post-industrial culture is further in transformation, and people have started realizing that they got carried away, and that not addressing to the to the desire of the human desire. And now they have started realizing this. In the West now we started realizing this, that there is something which has to be addressed, but unfortunately, even the West cannot address to that, to the desire. Why? Because they were all trained in the modern institutions, and over the period, they lost the ability to address to the cultural requirements. And because they lost the ability to address to the cultural requirements, they started producing architecture of postmodernist and other movements crop up. And I would give a lot of credit to a lot of regard to those attempts, although they were all superfluous. But I give a lot of regard to that, because at least that is actually a recognition that they have got carried away. The modern architecture has spoiled them. They took away this thing from the humanity, and they left aside that desire of human, that desire to relate to, the desire of identity. Started producing buildings which are faceless buildings, memoryless buildings. All these kind of, the entire world is today scattered with these kind of buildings. In Pakistan also we just copy. There they are facing, at least people are realizing that what they are producing has no relevance with the society. We proudly are constructing those buildings which were rejected by West in the 1970s. I will give you a very interesting example. No personal attack to anybody, but I regard my architects too much, my seniors also too much. So without naming, one of the building in Karachi is very interesting. That is how. This is a great comparison to the realization. Although I would not give much weightage to the West also, because they are also struggling to find out their reality. As our situation is that in Karachi, one building, Bomashal building was declared to be the best building in Pakistan, in Karachi. Interestingly,
and I think it was
it's a fair face, brutal architecture, face concrete design, nicely designed building. But a similar design was there in Boston City Hall. Quite similar in nature, in the character. And at the same time, Boston society decided that it's the ugliest building in the world and it should be demolished. And they decided that it should be demolished. So what a comparison is this? In Pakistan, we thought that it's the best building. It's a good building, I won't say. It's a simplified. Those who follow this thing that simplicity is everything. But what have this simplicity given to us? It has deprived us from our desire to relate to the buildings. So that is the reason they decided to demolish that building. It is quite surprising for us. The City Hall is a famous building in Boston, but they decided to demolish it. This is the fact. I'm just comparing. At the same, interestingly, time is the same. So I would say, although the thing is coming late, the realization in Pakistan coming late, but up till now, even the West has not come to any conclusion that what is the appropriate architecture for the world today. And interestingly, because in West, they are more handicapped. They are handicapped with their economic compulsions. Why? Because they cannot liberate themselves. Like if you want to design a building in Manhattan, you cannot do anything despite whatever you want. They who have to construct the volume and start putting cosmetic thing on top of it. So you are tied up more in West. So we actually, what is this lesson more? People are fond of this. A lot of architects, they have a lot of regard for it, but they are behind the contemporary. They are not up to the present the way global architecture is looked at, because this is what the philosophy was there at the dawn of the industrial culture. Today we are actually standing at another threshold of change, where where those forces are actually, the ongoing forces are trying to demolish, to dismantle the past, and to jump into a new state of society today, which is a fast communication, where we don't really know where we are heading to, where the social philosopher have not been able to assess the impact of change of technology on the society. Actually, let me tell you what happens. Actually, if you look into the history of civilization is actually is supersession of one society by another society. It's a story, it's continuous story of rise and fall of societies. You will agree with me, right from the period when human beings were living in caves. The technology was actually the dominant factor, which always determined the mode of production. And when they determined the mode of production, that caused a particular social pattern of life so the growth of societies took place. And every society had its own rise and fall, and everybody in architecture, when people are architects, this is the advantage of architecture, we have to look into the history and we have to look into how the societies grew. So we see that if we analyze it, we find that it's the technology that takes the society to a higher pitch, and a time comes when the society cannot go side by side with the technological advances. Resultantly, the society goes down, falls down, and but it happens that another society, another civilization comes up, picks it up from there, takes it to. And I would give example the reference to a world-renowned his philosopher of history, Toynbee, who writes that the history of philosophy is a continuous story of rise. With the rise and fall of societies, if you mark if you connect the tangent of every society, every cycle, it's always the civilization the world is always at the going high. World always show a continuous rise when you connect the tangent with the rise and fall of every cycle. If you connect the tangent, it's a continuous progress. So humanity progresses. So that is what I am saying. But the factor, if you analyze, is actually the technology. Like I would give you example from the agriculture society when the slaves were, those people, when the slaves were, human power was important. So there was a particular set of society. Then when you see that, when the steam engine came in, industrial society came. So technology took the society to a point where we started living in the urban societies started, there was a need for the people to come and sit together and work together. And that was the need of the society to produce mass housing, to produce, so what that was important, to produce something. Efficiency of architect was that to produce something, less is more in this phenomenon. Why? Because if it was not possible to produce complex situation which was not repeatable. So the need of the society was to produce mass housing, they had to live together because that was the requirement of that particular society. Today, when we see actually the society we are standing is the greatest threshold of change, and we don't really know where that we are heading to. That is actually those architects will be like me's of their time of today, who will discover the inner reality of today. That is what I am saying. That's the role of architect, is to discover today's desire, to the requirement. And I would give a lot of credit to the West, particularly because West is not copying each other only. Like we are copying West, then they produce and put some Corinthian column on top of a building. We put a Corinthian top in our Dubai's building and be happy that we have, done some, marvelous work. Because they cry over what they have done. They know that, they have gone carried away. And they know that their deficiency, that they cannot address to those cultural requirements which they have left aside. But that is how they are deliberately departing from the less is more philosophy. And they have now attempting to the futurism and everything, like the Hadid started producing architecture which is like surrealistic architecture or something like. But that is, again, I would say, the fulfillment of the inner desire of the architect. It's actually where is the human? Human being is actually standing aloof from the building, looking at the building. Whereas earlier in the classical time, when they were addressing to the human, he was packed parcel of those buildings. He was parcel. He was integral part of the urban fabric at that time. The buildings would not stand aloof from him. I would give lot of credit to Aga Khan Hospital architecture. And I highly admire that architecture. I would give a lot of credit to architect Mojan Khadim, who designed that building, who was a partner of Pate Associates. And you will see that, he, despite using all the modern technological fact, he gave due regard to the human aspect. Where you see there was no building in that earlier. I'm not talking about today's architecture which they are doing, today's intervention that they are doing, which is totally different from the original design of that complex. Original design of that complex, I would say I give a lot of credit to the architect. Why? Because he understood the philosophy of the classical time, where the buildings would wrap around the human beings, would not stand aloof from the human beings like in modern times they do. Rather, those buildings actually are integral part and the human beings just move around. So actually, this is the kind of architecture that actually addresses to the, even in present day. But this kind of architecture perhaps is not, if you want to put this kind of building in Manhattan, it's not possible for the architect to practice this kind of thing. But in Pakistan, it was an opportunity where at least he attempted. But I have given a lot of credit to the architect that he attempted, and to address to the cultural desire, and keeping himself within the, while using the technology for the benefit of the humanity. So that, there is a marked difference between the phase one of Aga Khan Hospital and what they are doing today. Because today, neither the architect is there, original architect. So what they're doing, they're again putting up this building number, so a building attributed to Mr. Such and Such or Mrs. Such and Such, and that building would stand aloof. And that was not the concept of Aga Khan Hospital. So they have actually destroyed their own concept. Why, I don't really know. So actually, that was actually my desire was also that in my buildings that I produce today, if I get a chance, I would bring this spirit back into the architecture, where actually at least the lost factor, which is the human factor, should be brought back. Whatever is the state of technology, I use that for the benefit of the humanity. Like I tried at certain places, like I designed the International Islamic University, where I created that kind of spaces. You move on, and like in Dargah 7 Sharif, where there are different functions, and so I created those. So there is, you can find, and the spirit that was there was that the building should not stand aloof from human beings. They should become the human being user should become integral part of that complex. So this is how one should try and attempt. Maybe one can succeed 10% or 5%. I don't really know how far I succeeded, but actually I would say that having that objective is a success within myself. Proud of anything? I'm not proud of none. In fact, from the because every project had to go through a set of compromises, where I had to go for a less level of compromise. I'm proud of that. I would say I will take it like this. But the basic objective I keep with me, and implementation is sometimes beyond your hands. I'll give example some of the projects, like when I designed this few projects, like when I designed Dargah 7 Sharif, redevelopment of Dargah 7 Sharif. The original master plan, you look at the master plan, the quality, but what compromises is something, but definitely I tried to bring that kind of spirit. Then I designed the International Islamic University, Islamabad, and there also I tried to bring that same spirit that how this development of the various spaces will take place in that. So that is how then we are also working on a couple of projects like we're working on the we did the master plan of revival of the southern downtown, where we're trying to bring the a major change. The major change is that instead of we design for the tires, this first time I tried my level best to design for the feet. So this is actually a great difference in approach. How far I succeed depends on the implementation of this project, but we created a pedestrian. First of all, the master plan clearly shows that we eliminated the highways, the cross highways from the downtown to create a cozy and environment for the city, where we could protect and bring back the glory of Karachi in the downtown. That is actually a project, if it could be implemented in the letter spirit, will bring back the glory of Karachi. Streetscapes will be improved because we have created a pedestrian trail and created a number of open pedestrianized plazas. One is already built, one plaza is already built near NED, which is called People's Square. Not in the original shape though, because of the certain factors I departed from there. But attempts are being made to bring in that thing, instead of bringing in the the thoroughfares from the city. We should eliminate. We try to reroute the traffic in such a manner that that the pedestrianization is given more importance. So that is how I take. I don't take pride in that. I will take pride in my attempt to do that.
Sir, I think one of your projects, which was very much criticized of Prime Minister's Secretariat in Islamabad, can you tell us something about the story of that? Do you think it's a Muslim architecture, Islamabad architecture?
You put me in a very difficult situation. Anyway, I will try to answer your question. You have to go into the history a little, because every project, when you talk of project, the projects become history actually. So you have to explore, you have to see that what happened actually. This project was designed by me way back in I think when Nawaz Sharif was there at that time. So we designed it, and there is a long story, very interesting story how we designed it. That's another part of the funny story. But once we designed it, thing was that I was working with NASPAC at that time. So I designed it. This was a period when Nawaz Sharif was on the was the Prime Minister, and we discussed. It's a long story. We discussed how we discussed and how we formulated the requirements, but we designed it. And what I conceived was a very modern building, which was in harmony with the rest of the buildings present in the Constitution Avenue. So accordingly, this building was designed with keeping in view the relationship of architecture with its surrounding and with other. It was a modern period building, I would say. And then we also did all the engineering and detailed architecture and prepared the tender documents, and even the work was awarded to a contractor that time. Then out of curiosity and our thing, we thought that once before inauguration we should show the model of the building to the Prime Minister once again. So that put us to the trouble. That was the biggest mistake that we did. So we took it to the Prime Minister's house and showed the model to the Prime Minister that just you see the building, and we are going to inaugurate this, asked you to inaugurate the building. And when he saw the building, it was the period when he had gone to India. And he had visited Rashtrapati Bhavan. Okay, this is fine, but where are the domes? So we were surprised to, that, this is not the time to ask for this kind of question. He said that neither it's white, all white, it should be, it should have the red stones and these things. And we were shocked to learn about that. Then he said, Mr. Architect, you should visit Rashtrapati Bhavan. That is Mughal architecture. And we thought that from which point it was Mughal architecture. It was something colonial style, anyway, Raj architecture or something. But we had no option, but tried our level best. That, sir, it's very simplified building. I think it's in line with the rest of the developers in that area. And I think we should go ahead with this thing. We tried to convince him a lot, but he did not agree. He said, no, nothing doing. You have to go to India, see that Rashtrapati Bhavan and use domes red color and all those things. So he had no option. The work was already awarded to the contractors. But nothing doing. We had to come back. Then I was working in National Park, and my colleague was Mr. Aga Khan, one of my finest friends, very nice architect, good fellow. So, and a good architect also. So, and we were being managed by the vice president of NASPAC, who was Mr. Sabir Parvesh Chauhan, another very nice. He is no more there in this world, and I have got a lot of regard for Mr. I have regard because the gentleman was an engineer and urban planner, but he always respected the professions, that would never intervene or compel the architects to do. That was the beauty, that was the pleasure of working in NASPAC at that time. So it was my early period of my career. He was known to be, Mr. Sabir Chauhan was known to be he was very fast in decision making, although would never, but he came back from there and then, asked both of us to make, my colleague also, to make two proposals, and we should take two proposals to the, so we prepared. So one was prepared by, at that time, we didn't use the PowerPoint presentation or, this Photoshop and other 3D other thing. So we made a collage type of, plans, beautiful plans, and large elevations. So one was prepared by me, put on the left side, other prepared by Mr. Aga Khan with the domes and red. I couldn't use that thing by virtue of my own nature. It was still I kept it quite simplified. So, but unfortunately, my plan was in front of the Prime Minister. He said, this plan. And then he said that elevation. It's the history. And we jumped out, we said, please, for God's sake, if you want to select that elevation, for God, that is the plan, the other plan. He said, no, this plan and that elevation.
This is what he said in Punjabi. Can you?
He said, a plan, te o elevation. And we tried to convince him. He said, no, you have this small, very pure, very nicely cooked patties, and you have this thing, but this plan and that elevation. And we tried to convince by all means that, at least if you want to go with that elevation, take that plan, for God's sake. But he said, no, he was so adamant. I don't know what made him so adamant. Either he liked the plan and the collage of the type working or whatever. I was not saying that, maybe he was not even appreciating the quality of plan or whatever, but he said this plan and that elevation. And that is how we ended up. And then he came back with another shock with us. And I would give salute to Mr. Sabir Parvesh Chauhan, that neither he said to me, nor he talked to Aga Khan. He kept quiet. And a week passed. And you can imagine that the contract was already awarded. There was a lot of pressure from the PM house. They didn't move. So I thought that he's in a difficult situation. He is feeling awkward to award the work either to me or to Aga Khan, and was feeling awkward in that. So I came forward and I said, it's very difficult for me to marry the two things. So it's better let Aga Khan do, he will do something at least. So he said that, okay, I will involve you. I mean, at that time, there was a good spirit in NASPAC, that he said that in lieu of this, then I said, he awarded me, rewarded me that, because of my sacrifice, I'll be working on the International Islamic Universities, and I did subsequently. And I gave this work to Aga Khan to marry the two things. And he did successfully. I don't know how far he did, what changes he made in the plans, because I don't know whether they were interested in the plan or not, but actually he did it. But this is the unfortunate part in a country that, people take decisions who are normally should leave this kind of thing to the professionals.
Small. And then
So there are many stories, and every story is like a joke, a funny story. So, but about the Benazir, when he said that, you people have designed very small houses for the secretaries and deputy secretaries and then the government officers of, somebody must have complained about that to the Prime Minister. So he said that, why have you done that? So we said that, because the certain area allocations are there and we could not cross. We crossed the limit, and then it is small, what can we do? He said, who decided that, this should be the ideas? This should be the sizes? We said. Then we said that I think the CDA chairman told him that it was decided by Prime Minister, earlier Prime Minister, Mohtarama Benazir Bhutto. So he said that, then he started addressing to the architects. We were standing there. He said, you, Mr. Architect, you, Hafeez, you tell us, was she an architect? What right she had to determine? You should have determined architect. And we were laughing. We were saying that, earlier, what happened to our design? The very well, So people don't realize this thing. But then he asked the secretary to why he should not increase the areas of that. So he told that if you increase the areas, it will have long repercussion on, the entire cadre, and you have to increase then the area of everyone. So he said that, okay, put up the case to me and we'll see later. And I think the case couldn't be taken up. So we have gone into many businesses. So consultancy is, of course, is a prime business. It's our core business, consultancy. So that is, we cannot call it a business actually. Consultancy, in our country is actually always face this thing, survival issue. So when you address to the other clients. So we thought that we should be able to address to our own selves. And that is how we will be able to control better. And that's another important point that I wanted to discuss at some point. Maybe in this discussion we can also bring it, because we have limited our professionals to, unlike engineers. Engineers have hundreds of lines after qualifying, goes into hundreds of lines. But in architecture, when one comes, he has very limited line. He's only expected to do the designing. 90% people are unable to design even after qualifying from their institutions. So what happens? They pass a life of curse. They don't, like yourself. You see, I would say you have adapted a different. I would say this is a great thing that you adapted a different profession, a profession associated with architecture. However, it's a different line. It's not designing. So I would say that one should encourage even architects to go. Have you got many architects? They are getting involved into development work. Why should they when they are not basically they are not designers, but they are much talented. They can have their talent expressed in other areas. Like if they go into construction, why can't they be utilized? So we opened up a company, development company of our own. So we started our own project. So there we are getting an opportunity that we are creating business for our consultancy. Yes. And secondly, we are in a much better position to implement our ideas. Although, again, there are commercial restrictions, there are commercial constraints, there are many other constraints. We have to make the project viable also. We understand that, and others also do face that problem. But within the framework of that commercial aspect and within the framework of those limitations, at least we will have a step ahead, better way we can fulfill our objective. So that is the reason we opened up that.
And it's a quality project. I think you have given not a
But I would say, yeah, but I would suggest that, we should look into our posture. I mean, this problem is in Pakistan more severe because in our institutions, students, the architectural students go into adapt this profession just because the circumstances take them to this. They don't go by choice. So what happens? Out of a class of say 50 students, hardly 2-3 people will be the students from whom you can really expect good design. Whereas the rest pass their life in curse. I mean, we don't realize what we are doing. We are creating environment for them, a cursed environment for them for a whole of their life, and not letting them go into the right kind of work. They can become such an asset into many areas. We have curbed them there. And I think we should look into this very seriously, this problem. You study any class, go to NED, go to the students who are coming up. There are hardly 2-3% students. And when they go to their various offices, people expect them to design where they are totally handicapped, sitting there, struggling, and they ultimately become followers. Ultimately becomes, copycats. That's what we are doing. And with the result, the projects that come into their hands, they are reflected in the environment. So I think we need to look into this thing. We have to create better related professions, architectural related professions for them to go where they can really excel. Our education system is such that we are restrained from question. We are restrained from questioning. And we are taught in that manner that when we grow up in our houses, we should not question our parents. When we go to the institution, we should not question our teachers. And the entire society is not allowed to question whether it is your religion, it's a social norm. If you question and you have not, in conformative type, then you should look for your survival. You cannot even survive in the society where you are not of conformative type, because your society do not allow you. The children are not allowed to question. You see the children, at least the children in the West, are encouraged to question today, and our religion also encourage. They say they respect your parents. Like Quran says, you respect your parents, but you are not supposed to only follow them. You have to use your mind. So we are actually made a kind of, creatures who are not willing to think. I'm talking about generality. I'm not talking about those people who might get offended by my talk, because many good people also there who are thinkers. I'm not. There are exceptions are there, but I am just saying that generality in our. So I will ask my younger generation to develop among themselves the ability to question. If they will be able to question, they can bring in the change. Unless you question, you cannot never bring the change. You will just start following. We follow what we have made it a habit. We will going to follow West. Whatever they are doing, we will be suffering from COVID. We are expecting they are going to devise something, and we will follow. We will use it. So this is actually the attitude. We should develop that ability in ourselves in every field of life, not only in architecture. In every field of life, we should learn how to question.